Hello and welcome to the live stream August edition of HIPS HTX, that's Houston Indie Podcast Society. For those who have not been here before and are new to the stream, thank you all for joining us. If you're new or if you're one of our previous viewers, we appreciate you coming and hanging out with us.
We appreciate you anyway.
Yeah,
all the ways.
We appreciate everybody. We have a very cool guest tonight. His name is Christopher Jordan. He is part of, I guess, owner operator of HC Universe, which is a podcast network. He is co-host of Dudes and Beer. Oh man, he's got so much stuff. Podcast Cadet. What else do you have, Chris? What am I missing?
Oh, Talking Sound podcast. We've also got the Podcast Cadet training series, as well as the Music of No Disassemble. So I'm everywhere you want to be.
Yeah. So if you don't know Chris, we met at Comic Palooza. Actually, we met in 2019 edition of Comic Palooza. We had a panel together that was all about podcast networks and how to start it, how to run it, how to do things. So Chris and I go way back. Obviously, Carrie, you and Chris go way back as well, being part of Comic Palooza yourself.
And being a Dudes and Beer podcast guy, what are you drinking?
I'm actually going light tonight. We're going full on Miller.
All right, no sponsorship, but
there's no sponsorships. But hey, if you want to sponsor,
no, absolutely not. I have no beer sponsorships at the moment. Oddly enough, the year that I get nominated for an award for Dudes and Beer happens to be the year that I am rebranding my show.
Oh, very interesting. It always works out that way, right?
Being nominated for a news and politics award right now in the People's Choice Podcast Awards. So we'll see what happens. But it's like, hey, that'd be pretty cool to win an award as I rebrand.
What's the rebrand? Can you talk about that yet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The rebrand has already gone on to soft launch. All of our social media and everything has already started the switch over and is now Curious Realm, formerly Dudes and Beer Podcast. So as of December, I'm a round numbers guy. So it was one of those like, we're gonna wait till episode 350 to do the official switch over, which happens to be right at the end of November. So the first episode of Curious Realm will be December.
So this is a very interesting topic because a lot of people out there don't just completely rebrand. They'll stop and start something new. So let's walk through the process. What was the impetus for the rebranding first? Let's talk about that.
You know, the impetus is probably goes back to the impetus of why I started Dudes and Beer. You don't want to be a dude anymore. Well, it's the fact of let's go non-binary with a name in today's modern society. Like literally, probably a good 60% of my guests are females. So it's always been a running joke for the last 5 years, almost like, I guess I'm a dude tonight. You know, can I drink wine while I'm on the show? Like all kinds of stuff. But the show started as literally a way for me to hang out with people other than audio and video engineers.
Sure.
The only time I was ever out of the house was when I was on a show. So the only people I hung out with socially were people who did what I do for a living. And I was like, man, you know what? I kind of miss that. I'm almost 40. I'm 45 now. It shows you how long ago I started that. And yeah, it literally started as a way for me to hang out with other people who did other things one night a week on purpose.
That's probably why a lot of people start podcasts, just to hang out with like-minded people.
Well, and it's literally organically grown into what it is. At the time, I did all of my work here in Austin, and I started traveling about 35 weeks a year for work. So right at that same time, at about year 2.5, when that happened, where I started traveling full time for work, it became the fact that we started having guests every week. It wasn't just the 2 or 3 of us sitting around the table anymore. It was a conversation with a guest. And it was like, wow, man, I'm on spotty hotel Wi-Fi, guys. I can either dial into the studio or I can dial into the guest. We're probably going to dial into the guest tonight. So yeah, it just kind of evolved into this. And as it did, the audience grew and grew and grew. And got to a point where within the last year on social media, I could not even place an ad because beer was in the title. Not Miller.
Yeah. Okay.
Not anything,
No, I
but
got you.
just because beer was in the title. If I tried to place an ad to grow my audience, it was like, sorry, we don't promote alcohol. As soon as I changed the name to Curious Realm, formerly Dudes and Beer Podcast, the same exact ad ran on social media. Same exact ad, no difference. So
I believe
that'll
that.
go to teach you, folks.
Dealing with both of those subjects, definitely, I can definitely see why that's important now. It's so what's this rebranding? Let's talk about the process of it, and because you're just gonna like you said December 1st, right?
Yep.
So you're just gonna episode 351 will be the new show. How are you doing your change with your RSS feeds and all that good stuff and your social media? How are you doing those changes?
Well, granted, the RSS feed coming from everything will, of course, be coming from a whole new website. Okay. So as of right now, the Dudes and Beer website has been officially migrated and is actively page for page copied over at curiousrealm.com. So everything except for episode posts is there. So whenever we have an episode every Tuesday night, and we recommend people to go look up documents, a lot of the times we'll be talking about declassified programs, things like that. So we direct people to the Knowledge Vault on Curious Realm instead of the Knowledge Vault on Dudes and Beer now, things like that. So and even our social media call to action has been to Google Curious Realm, not even to go visit, not to go follow Dudes and Beer, not to subscribe to Dudes and Beer, but just Google Curious Realm.
That's important for your standing in Google for sure.
Within the last month and a half of that being our call to action for the audience, we have overtaken Google search. So we are now, whenever you search Curious Realm, top of the Google search category for that. It happens pretty quick. So
I just Googled yourself and got to your Facebook, and I see how you're Curious Realm, formerly Dudes and Beer. Yeah. So are you going to keep that? How long are you going to keep doing that formally?
Until shortly after the actual launch of Curious Realm.
Okay.
And that's really because we've spent a good 5 years. And a lot of people, I think, Carrie, and we talked about this, I don't think that there was a single session about podcasting at Comic Palooza that did not cover the fact of keep at it. You're going to be lonely for like year 1 and 2, man. One of the first articles I read when I started getting into podcasting was, so you want to start a podcast, get ready to be lonely. And it was like, just keep doing it. You know, you may not get followers at the beginning, but if you keep doing it and you make it past episode 50, you'll be surprised at the windfall that happens. And it took a little while to happen, but the organic way that Dudes and Beer grew, it grew organically as a community as well, and has gotten to the point that the community post articles, they carry on conversations aside from what we do. So it really is important to kind of curate that and let that audience know that we're switching over.
I think that's very important what you just said about building communities, because building communities, it builds fans, it builds people that are into what you're into, it brings more people into it. I've done it with Metal Geeks, we're doing it with Hips now, building community. That is the new way to build your listenership, really.
Absolutely. And like a lot of oddly enough, I thank COVID for a lot of our crazy rampant growth over the last year or so, mainly because a lot of what the Dudes and Beer community on Facebook is the posting of news articles that just spur conversation, things that we cover on the show. Like I just posted a thing earlier today about a PDF that I found, a scientific article that I posted about bidirectional gravitational waves for the creation of stable wormholes, things like that. And those just spur conversation in my
I posted
group.
about a Marvel movie. Does that count?
Yes, absolutely.
Same
Because
thing,
that's what your
right?
group's into.
That's right.
You know, so it's really whatever fosters that conversation and that feeling of belonging and community. That's what we're all looking for. I mean, if you're doing a podcast about something you're not deeply interested in, you may want to rethink that.
Yeah,
It's,
totally
it's all
agree.
about it's all about people coming together and finding a community that talks about specifically the stuff that they're into, where they're not going to get judged for it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's obviously what most people are looking for. They don't want to jump into a group somewhere and get judged for their thoughts and opinions. So they look for like-minded people, kind of for affirmation, but also just to kind of meet other people who are like-minded.
Yeah, because you don't want to... Go ahead.
Kind of going back to your Google search idea, Bex did chime in saying that it's very clever, and I completely agree. It is pretty clever to have your call to action is like Google this instead of going to this particular website.
Yeah. I actually got that tip of advice from a SEO guy that I had on my Podcast Cadet training series. And his whole job, he owns an entire SEO and search engine results page company. That's all he does. And he was like, you would be surprised what that does. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to test your theory, man. I'm going to do that for a month. And on the screen, I showed where Curious Realm was because I'd only launched it about a month. I've only launched it about 3 months ago, the website itself. So the fact that there are no articles posting there, there's no new content since the website's been built. The fact that it's top of the Google search rankings is pretty impressive. And all that took was literally me telling them, go check it out. Go Google it. Tell your family to Google it. You don't even have to click enter. Like,
just take their phones and Google it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting the way that you can leverage and move a community to doing things like that. And it's so absolutely essential in the field of podcasting.
Definitely. So I guess one of the reasons that we really wanted to have you on the show, you are actually in the field doing audio visual stuff. You helped us out at Comic Palooza.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.
And hey, Randall, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
What's up, man?
But yeah, so audiovisual stuff, like how important is that, especially in today's climate for podcasting?
I would say for me, it's paramount. To me, content is king, of course. Don't get me wrong. I could probably name off a good 2 or 3 shows where the audio kind of makes me cringe, but the content is beautiful and amazing.
Hope it's not mine.
And it's one of those, for me, audio is absolutely essential because I live in that world. I'm from a broadcast environment. But at the same time, I don't heavily edit my show. My show is 100% live. You know, it would almost be like going back and editing this conversation later. You could do it, but how much of it would you miss? Right. And as long as there's not any crazy noises going on, not like a fan going on in the background, things like that, you know, I usually leave a lot of stuff alone. But my system is also made specifically for that. Even
so
my
you're doing a lot
system.
of like in the board editing, so to say.
Yeah, everything that I do, and once again, I come from a live broadcast environment. Like that's the waters that I swam in for years was live radio, that kind of stuff. So my level of being able to get things where I need them to be is maybe a little bit different than the average person who needs a lot more post-production. And post-production is probably one of the most important things to really learn as far as audio engineering goes when it comes to podcasting, mainly because one of the big things I point out to people all the time, I brought this slide up accidentally a minute ago, but is garbage in equals garbage out, the audio cycle of shame. And this is something that we audio engineers preach about all the time. We can only fix what's there. We like if the audio is blown out and distorted, it's real hard to get rid of that distortion.
You can only fix so much.
Yeah, precisely. We're still trying to learn how to walk on water, but
good luck.
The way I put it to people softly and kindly and funnily is, yes, you can polish a turd. You just end up with poop everywhere. So of course you want to try and get the cleanest audio signal you can from the beginning. Which of course comes down to proper use of equipment, not even necessarily proper equipment, so to speak. I think a lot of people get really, really elitist sometimes in the world of podcasting. Like I say that as I'm talking into a almost $600 microphone. But
you elitist.
At the same time, hey, I'm not beyond telling people like, oh yeah, somebody gave you a Blue Yeti, use it. You use what you have at your disposal. Just know how to use it properly. One of the big things that I try to explain to people all the time is the difference between their USB ports, whether it's on a laptop or whether it's on a desktop. A lot of interfaces, things like that, you can tell that they're slightly more pro grade because they'll actively come with a power supply in addition to the USB connection. And basically that gives a little bit more boost to the preamp. But if you're using just a straight USB microphone, make sure to plug it into one of the USB ports that has a little SS on it for solid state. Those actually have a level and constant amount of power. The other USB ports do not. Those USB ports fluctuate the amount of power they have depending on how many devices are plugged in to that circuit. So as opposed to the SS ones, which are on their own individual circuit each, the others all share a circuit. So if you use a USB mic or a USB interface and you're getting that intermittent pop that happens every few minutes sometimes, it's because you're losing voltage. So even then, knowing how to properly use the equipment that you have can be hugely important. So a little bit
That's
of
really good advice.
That's great advice.
I see it in podcast groups all the time, and people are like, "Oh, you're using crap." It's like, no. It's not that you're using bad stuff.
Just know your equipment.
You just need to make sure that you're using it in the proper way.
Right.
And same thing.
Now, Bex does say that they're using a Yeti, so.
No shame in the Yeti.
No shame in the Yeti, for
I've
real.
got one
If that's what you're using.
Yeah, I've got one in my mic collection.
Me too.
I do as well. I think we all do.
I've also got, I notice that Carrie there has the SM58, or pretty well equivalent to the SM58 anyway. Is that a PG48?
This one is the SM58, but Guitar Center had sort of comparatively same ones. For I think they still do, and they had a Black Friday special. Yeah, picked up like 3 or 4 of them. They were like $99 each, or $49 each actually. I was like, they sound great. They're perfect mics. Not perfect, but
they're
like you said,
made. They're made to be able to scream into.
Exactly, and you just know how to use it. That's exactly what you said.
Well,
it's not a $600 mic, but it does what it needs to do.
Well, it does what it needs to do and sounds proper. There's not a lot of gain to it. There's not a lot of noise, things like that. And once again, that's just learning proper placement of things. If you happen to have a whole lot of power adapters, things like that going on in your system or setup, try to keep your microphone cables away from that. Microphone cables tend to pick up things like a radio antenna, let's just say. So they'll pick up 60 cycle hum from lighting, from power outlets, from televisions, things like that. So the more things similar to that you have, especially if you have a fader or a dimmer in your room, especially keep your microphone away from power. At that point, you'll be picking up the sound of that dimmer, and sometimes might get a little phase sound in there. It's pretty wild. But audio, it starts in a lot of ways, and most of it is the space that you're in. One of the things that I see all the time is people mentioning soundproofing their studios. This is a slide that I use in my presentation regularly to show people the difference between a soundproofed room and a sound-treated room. Remember, if you're trying to get rid of echoes, slaps, things like that, sound treating is what you need. Soundproofing is something that is typically done from the ground up. So you're actively building like walls within walls to trap air between them, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more construction with soundproofing than there is with sound treating. Sound treating is just there to kind of get rid of the flat angled surfaces that meet together that cause all that stuff. So if you notice on that slide again, you can see how everything on there is arranged in kind of a checkerboard pattern where there's empty space and covered space. That's the idea, is to just kind of break up that sound. Even a carpet in the room. One of the really
moving blankets work really well.
Yep. Moving blankets work
somewhere for the sound to go, actually.
Yeah.
And sort of be deadened a little bit.
Even better than that is if you take that moving blanket and suspend it 1 inch off the wall. So that once again, the sound goes through the blanket, hits the wall, then hits the blanket again. So it's actually doubling that protection that you get at that point. And then you can actively like put grommets in the top and make it a curtain, push it off to the side if you don't want it there all the time. Things like that.
And Wallace too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wallace,
I mean,
and grommets.
Even if you look right here over my shoulder, if you see that little bitty black square right there, that's actively a piece of 1/2-inch plywood that is plugging my window. And on the back side of that plywood is 2-inch studio foam, followed by an entire roll of insulation, followed by moving blankets up against the window to block sound from the outside coming into my studio.
Mm-hmm.
Not to
I think that's big too, is talking about like makeshift sound treatment, because you can do it. You don't have to buy the expensive panels. No. Also, I would suggest not buying the cheap panels on Amazon either. If you're going to spend some money on treatment that's actually going to work. And moving blankets, I think, would be the most budget friendly in that category.
Absolutely. And in that right, man, straight up Harbor Freight. Just go to Harbor Freight. You can pick them up for about $5 to $8 each at Harbor Freight. And you don't need a lot of them really to do the job.
No, you don't.
One of the best places you can do it is actively to hang that thing from the ceiling, not even the walls. And then
I've actually got one right above me now.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And it stops a lot of slap at that point. You know, so it really is, once again.
You've mentioned that word a few times, slap. Can you explain to people what that means?
A slap is kind of that small echo that you hear in tiled rooms, bathrooms, things like that. You know how you can tell the difference whenever somebody like takes their phone call into the bathroom? Because you can hear that slight amount of reverb.
Besides the straining noises, yes.
Yeah. Besides the fact that they're like holding their breath for 2 minutes while they talk to you. You know, it happens frequently in places with hard surfaces, tiled floors, hard wood floors, that kind of stuff. And it's basically created through right angles. If you're a pool player, you know, like the dots on a pool table are actually there for you to make right angles to get the ball around the table. And sound works the exact same way. It wants to bounce from right angle to right angle. And basically what happens is the sound bounces off the wall in front of you, bounces to the wall or the ceiling, then back to the wall, then down to the floor. It makes a big square inside of that and can make what's called a standing square wave, which is where you get echoes. That's where you start getting in live sound systems in rooms, you start actively getting the wails and moans that happen, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of physics that can go into that. You can go to places like L-Acoustics online. I know Auralux. If you go to the Auralux website, they actively have a calculator in there where you can put in the dimensions of your room, and it will give you the best Auralux product for your uses. So you can put it, you can put in there like, yes, I have wood floors. This is the size of my room, and it does all the echo calculation and figures out the density and thickness of the foam that you need to get. So
that's great. Make it as easy for you as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, other than that, it's literally sound math. Like, I could teach you to divide things by the speed of sound and figure out the lowest frequency in a room to start with equalizer. But it's a little complex. It gets way deep nerdy. But it is fun to be able to do. And it's important to be able to treat your space properly. I mean, even the spaces that we're in right now. Once again, I've got a 32-inch monitor in front of my face, but I've also got foam surrounding that. And a pad of foam
I definitely
up above my head.
am. My makeshift office, my studio is definitely not set up for any kind of sound proofing or anything. Kitchen's right next door here.
Sure.
Washer dryer. So the outside's like right behind me. You can hear stuff. It's just not designed. Maybe I should get you over here and we can take a look at stuff.
Oh yeah, no, most definitely. I do small studio consultation all the time. That's one of the things that I specialize in, because a lot of people do not realize the absolute affordable ways that you can do it. There are a lot of products online that are really expensive, like SoundClouds. They're one of my favorite things in the world, and it's literally just a piece of shaped foam that hangs from a certain distance on the ceiling. You can accomplish that same thing with the cardboard that you literally move pint glasses with. Like, you can go to Uline and buy like what you would move glasses with inside of a box. And it's just big crosshatch material that looks like a checkerboard. You can spray paint it any color you want, but you can hang that exact same cardboard material from the ceiling and have the exact same effect. And paint it, color it, do whatever you want. Even the same thing with egg crates. That's an old school band thing to do, is just go out and get the paper egg crates. Because once again, all you're trying to do is create that surface that is uneven. Create that surface that's going to break up and scatter the flat signal of a flat wall. So it doesn't necessarily have to be pretty. There's a difference between absorbing sound and reflecting sound. And if you look right here at the top of that picture next to the astronaut, if you look at the little white things hanging off the ceiling, those are sound clouds, where the thickness of the foam is actually at different depths. And it's like big squares of foam that are longer and shorter than each other. You can achieve the same thing with just balsa wood. You know, you can make them yourself out of cardboard, all kinds of stuff. The main thing is achieving the sound that you want to achieve. One of the taglines of my Talking Sound podcast since the beginning has been where -10 is a number to be desired. And -10 is those products that you have that are consumer grade products that are not necessarily professional or XLR connection. But the fact is, if they get the job done and they give you the sound you're looking for, do it, use it. Yeah. You know, like
spend a little bit of money on treatment is basically what the concept is.
It's important for you. It's important for you to work within your budget, yet still get the results that you need. And they can all be had within a budget, guarantee. Within a budget of $100 to a couple $100, you can get sound treatment done properly. So it's nothing that you have to spend a great amount of money on.
Yeah. One thing that you didn't mention, you talked about the walls, you talked about the ceiling. we didn't talk about the floors. We talked about the hardwood floors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, how would you treat that? Because currently, my best option is I got a rug and I got a super thick pad to go under the rug to give it a little bit of extra support.
Yeah.
And it works great for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a typical room that you're podcasting in, which, I mean, let's be real, most people's studios are probably just like mine. They're a bedroom in the home. So you're looking at maybe a 10 by 10 space. You know, that's not a lot to have to treat. So yeah, like a 6 foot by 6 foot rug is perfectly fine. For a long time, I did just like you, Jared. I had just neoprene flooring down, you know, like the little jigsaw flooring that you get for a home gym or a kid's room, something like that. Mm-hmm. You could use a decent sized yoga mat. You could just use a shag carpet if that's your thing. For me, as long as you have some kind of surface on top of the hard surface, you're going to.
And shag carpets are stylish too.
It is. It's back in.
That's right. Everything is cyclical.
Well, it really is.
Yeah, it's and I think a lot of that also comes down to choosing which microphone that you want to use, you know. Just kind of hopping back to that topic, whether you're talking about a USB mic, a condenser mic, a dynamic mic, you know, they all do different things and are used for different purposes.
So let's talk about that real quick.
Sure.
I took audio classes. I have a film video degree, so I did take audio classes, and a lot of people don't understand the differences. We lost our host. Well, we can talk for a minute.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand the difference between, like you said, a dynamic mic, or let's talk about omnidirectional and different directional mics that people can buy, and what is the best for. There's ones that are better for podcasting. There's ones that are better for picking up music. Blah blah blah. Let's talk about that for a minute, because you're an expert at this stuff.
Well, typically, the two mics.
You already had a slide and everything.
Oh yeah. This is kind of a breakdown of what just basics of what a dynamic and condenser mic are, folks. And granted, a dynamic mic would be an example like what I'm using, what Carrie's using. Dynamic mics are typically what you see being used as for vocals on stages.
Yeah.
They do not require any additional quote phantom power or 48 volt.
Explain real quick what phantom power is. So phantom power is if you plug it into something, you don't have to have an external power source.
Yes, exactly. Phantom power is an additional power that is taken to the preamp of the circuit in order to provide more juice to the microphone so it can pick up more range of sound. And once again, most of those are going to be in your condenser microphone range. Those are used for miking things at a distance, miking things like whole rooms, miking things like vocals in a studio setting. You know, like whenever you see your favorite performer with their headphones on and their heads high and a mic's hanging over their head, that's normally a condenser mic, and that's used with tube amplifiers, things like that, to provide a whole new range of harmonic pickup. The problem with that lies in the fact that they're extraordinarily sensitive. Like I've got a 414 right over here that I love, but the chance of me using it is so rare because of the sensitivity. I mean, if I turn it on in here, I can hear the television in the living room from across the house through my door. That's how sensitive it is. Now, granted, you put that in a vocal booth and record some, like that's how you get great ASMR recordings, things like that. That's how you do like.
Because you're in a confined space and it's that's the audio. You want that reverberation picking it up,
exactly.
From around that area.
You want every harmonic that you can pick up. You want.
Remember that vocal booth you went into as a kid to sing karaoke songs at the theme park? Yeah, that's what it is.
Where you walk in and when you close the door, you hear nothing.
Yeah,
that's the idea behind a condenser microphone, is that you can use it to pick up very, very sensitive sounds at a very low volume or very low gain. And the idea is, once again, to choose the microphone for the space that you're using it in. Like, for instance, if where we were on the convention floor,
sure,
at
let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk
Comicpalooza.
about what equipment we had and how we can improve that too.
Yeah, well, and I mean, we were using, you guys were using the exact microphone that should be spec'd for something along those lines. Quite literally, an SM58. The pattern of the microphone of an SM58 is cardioid. It looks kind of like a heart.
Yep.
And this way, which means that it picks up more from the back, the middle back to the front, and nothing from the backside. So that means you're not going to get the sound of the audience talking over there. You might pick up some people far behind you, but you're not going to have an issue with feedback necessarily, the way that you would with a condenser mic in that situation. That kind of stuff. You get a lot more noise rejection and a lot more control.
That cross sound is not showing up. Yeah, totally.
Well, and that's a problem that I see frequently asked in podcast groups is, like the bleed through issue that you get in a very small confined space. And that's why you want to use dynamic microphones, folks. If you notice that third part right there, rooms that are, quote, echoey, dynamic microphones will help kind of quash some of that and keep it in check, because their patterns are a lot tighter. They don't overlap each other. Once you start getting into condenser microphones, you can deal with phasing issues where the guy on the top of the table and the guy on the bottom of the table sound great, but the guy in between them sounds like he's in a tin can.
Sure. All right, so I'm going to give you
his microphone's being squished.
So I'm going to pretend if anybody has a question that's watching, let's talk about mics now.
Please.
But if I'm ready to start my own podcast, I know nothing about audio. I don't know what a cardioid or a condenser or any of that stuff is. I don't have a lot of money. I set up my room. I haven't done any kind of soundproofing to it. I just open up my laptop and I want to get a mic and record with my friends. What's that first step for a microphone that I need to be looking for?
I would say probably at that point, I would normally push people into the direction of at least a decent omnidirectional USB microphone, not necessarily in the range of Yeti, but more in the range of what is used for business conferencing.
Sure.
Things like that. You can pick them up. I know I have one that I keep in my backpack whenever I travel as a just in case, that I've used in more than one situation with Dudes and Beer where we were just at a restaurant or at a bar and we're going to go live. And all I did was stick it on top of the napkin dispenser in between us. Done. It picks up everybody. It picks up everything pointed at it.
And those are they're not microphone. They look like a sort of like a heavy triangle.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
With a little bass, because we did an audio setup for my work, and we used one on every table or one for every two tables, and then we were able to go this really cool Shure mixer. So, we were able to set it up where if somebody's talking on the first mic, they're the loudest, and if somebody's talking on the fifth mic, they get louder, and it's just there's like no difference in who's talking. Really cool setup that you can do that now.
Yep.
Without having to automatically switch over and turn people up and down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, here is the exact microphone that I have right here, the MC1000, which is $58.
That's a good price.
I mean, I'm quite honestly, I'm looking forward to, I've been talking with Mobo about having them on the Talking Sound podcast because I have used their products for so long. They are literally one of my go-tos when it comes to just throw in my backpack, not care about the price of something mobile gear. They have a set of mobile lapel mics that's straight TRRS. It's $30.
Wow.
And it's got a headphone adapter on it. So like you can plug in headphones and hear cues and things like that. Like it's amazing for like $30. And
not a sponsor.
Got 2 lapel mics that plug in. So you can plug in yourself and a guest.
Well, that's cool.
That just stays in my backpack 24/7. They've also got another great one that's TRRS that plugs straight into your phone and is just a tiny little bud microphone that has a 90-degree swoop, so you can
like a lightning adapter, or
I don't know if they have it in lightning adapter. Most of their stuff is TRRS connection.
Okay, because I have a TRS connector to a lightning adapter, and I have a Sennheiser that I use when I've recorded stuff on my phone before. You get really good sound, sound.
Yeah. Well, and it's so many people, and as a matter of fact, yes, they do actively make it in lightning. There it is, right there. But yeah, and that's another one that is just like crazy cheap, man, like absolutely affordable. In like the 30, I think this is like $20 or something like that.
Leave it to Apple to have to make a proprietary adapter.
Yeah, $15 to buy it used.
Not bad.
Yeah, and those are great. Like I've used those numerous times on my show, where I've just been somewhere and wanted to do an interview and just popped it into my phone. Don't forget that your phone, man, phones have 4K cameras on them. They literally have some of the best noise reduction technology out there.
They really do.
Right in your phone.
I have the newest iPhone, and I have actually shot videos for clients with that Sennheiser with the lightning adapter. Yep. And it looks really good, sounds really good. Get yourself a gimbal, and you're set for you're good, man.
Yeah.
My webcam is my Note 20.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Exactly. And there are so many solutions out there now. Like, you do not have to spend a lot of money to get a good quality result. You really don't anymore. It's great. Like, hey, don't get me wrong. If you've got the budget for an EV20, this happened because I started doing voiceover work for people and started doing intros and outros, that kind of stuff. I treated myself.
Treat yourself.
Like I honestly am a huge believer in that. If there's a toy that you can afford for your art form, go get it. Don't forget that you're supposed to be having fun with this thing. Mm-hmm. Don't go crazy. You don't have to have all this madness back behind you. But have fun with
expensive.
it. There's no other way than But at the same token, I know my gear, and there's not a single piece over here. There's one piece actually in this rack that I bought brand new. One. The rest of them were all purchased used. So do not be afraid to buy used gear, folks. If you got a buddy that knows audio, if you got a guy like Carrie or like myself that have taken some classes, know a thing or two, hey, don't be afraid to have them go to Guitar Center with you.
Yeah, sure.
Don't be afraid to lean on those people and be like, hey, I'm supposed to be meeting somebody to pick up this microphone off Craigslist. Can I buy you a cup of coffee and bring you with me? Don't be afraid to lean on those people for that kind of knowledge, because buying used gear.
If you're taking me to Guitar Center, I want something for my drum set. That's all I gotta say.
Hey, if you're taking me to Guitar Center, we better have some time. That's all I gotta say. You better not be in a rush to leave.
Yeah,
because we're
gonna be there a while.
I'm breaking into about 3 or 4 conversations while we're there.
Chris is going to be playing Stairway to Heaven for everybody.
No stairway.
No stairway.
But yeah, I think a lot of people really, really get intimidated by the technology. They really do. I think a lot of people get caught up in the technology, and the one that I show people all the time was the Nerdist podcast. Mm-hmm. My wife was a raging fan of the Nerdist podcast when it was going on, and I forget what it's rebranded to now, but it's rebranded
ID 10 something,
something like that. But the audio is still the audio is still absolutely the same.
Yeah,
and it's one of those like, what stairwell are you recording your show in?
I remember the very first one. It was like in his garage.
Yeah. And hey, the thing is, they got budget. They got money. Mm-hmm. They spend their budget and their money on promotion. Mm-hmm. The listeners are there despite the little bit of echo that happens because of the untreated room. Some people enjoy that because it kind of makes them feel like they're there in the room with them. That's what my wife says, and I'm like, well, enjoy that.
It's not it's not overly produced like radio,
Yeah, and that's just it. Like, I've been the finalization editor for NPR podcasts, for the On Story podcast for Austin Film Festival, and like, you can have that style of production, absolutely. But remember, I was the finalization editor. There's a reason that style of production sounds that way. It is so entirely crafted to sound that way. Yep. The fact that 3 other people touched that show before I ever saw it, as far as editing, like, my job was just to listen for utter quality and level of audio across the whole thing, and then to make sure that it was squeezed out.
They definitely have a soundscape they've created, just like the movies create, that same stuff with color and style and everything. Audio can be the same way.
There's an absolute flow to the way it's produced, and everything is squeezed out at exactly the same levels. Everything is squeezed out to exactly a broadcast level at the end of it, which is something that I'd love to touch on real quick, because I think what scares a lot of people away from podcasting is the idea of hosting and the idea of file size when it comes to hosting. Remember, folks, you do not have to upload a 320 megabit per second audio file. You don't. Please, God, whatever you do, don't be uploading waves.
No, please don't.
Wave files are insanely huge. The broadcast standard for NPR shows is 600 or 64 kilobytes per second mono.
Yeah.
That's whenever you're sending an NPR show to a radio station, that's the format that they ingested in their server. So why are you kicking out anything different, would be my question.
Mostly because they don't know any better.
Well, and that's just it. Most people, the automatic default for any MP3 export is 320. So they just hit export and go.
No, this is a great point. We need to really do a whole episode about file formats. What kind of megahertz do you need to save as, and everything that you need to know. This is a really great topic. A lot of people don't really know about it. I've been podcasting for a long time, and I do one of my shows. We play music in it, and I tend to make it a lower bit quality just because it is music and it's not, that type of situation. I play a lot of bands that, they're not going to come after me or anything, but if you want to support the band, if you like it, you're going to go buy the CD and get that high quality audio version. You're going to buy the vinyl if you want to do it that way. You don't care about my little, mono version of your song, It helps bands.
Oh, absolutely.
And then we talk about it, audio quality is definitely important, and people do get overwhelmed by it, I think so as well. They get utterly hung up on it, much like the necessity for an SM7, SM7B or one of these microphones. Just hit record, man. Just start doing it, and find a format for the show that works for you. Find technology that works for you, and really get past those first couple humps. Now, Chris, I got a question for you. Your editing style. What is your style? Do you cut out all the uhs and ums and all that kind of stuff, or do you leave it more conversational?
Now, granted, on my show, I do not do that. On any of my shows, but
you don't cut them out.
I don't.
Okay, me either.
I do not. Mainly because I prefer a conversational format in things. Once again, coming from the realm of radio, coming from the realm of television, the only thing that we ever cut out was commercials out of a program. Other than that, like a lot of my guests, granted, especially on Dudes and Beer, when you're talking about a lot of the topics we talk about, the main reason I don't edit that is it could seem like I'm editing their words and what they're trying to say. And you can have a lot a lot of control over that as an editor.
You can.
Like, you really, really can. And there's, I don't know if you've ever interviewed anybody from the high-end corporate world, things like that, guys, but there's actually a realm of people that whenever you have them as a guest, they have handlers that actively have to listen to it, like companies that have to approve the episode. I've actually, like when I interviewed Bob Cornelia, the lead designer for Black Magic, the Black Magic, who was it? It was the PR rep for Black Magic, was actually on mute on the phone, like actively listening to the episode as we recorded. So
I've been to a Black Magic party in Vegas during NAB.
Nice.
I remember some of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I love Black Magic is great too.
It's interesting though, because sometimes, you know, they want to see the episode beforehand. And if there's something that's brought up, you know, like, hey, maybe we missed it during the live thing, let me listen to it. And then they approve the episode. But if there's minutes that I have to cut out, hey, I have to cut it out to make that happen. For that manufacturer to be able to cover their product on my show, you know? And it's not beyond the realm of reason for authors or anybody in the realm of politics, things like that, to want right of refusal as to whether or not an episode goes out. That's absolutely not within the realm of impossibility in this day and age. So, I mean, of course, I know Jared is a really good one on getting those documents signed by people and being straightforward with folks at the beginning, and having them even read into the microphone a small disclaimer that, you know, you're allowed to use this, stuff like that. But hey, if they ask you to edit some stuff out, be nice, you know, don't be a dink about it. That's not cool.
Don't just claim, oh, well, it's my show, I'll release it because it's my content. No, I mean, word gets around. If you're hard to deal with, then you will eventually end up not having anybody coming on your show.
Yeah, precisely. And the main thing is, what do you want to put forth? You know, for me, I don't mind if there are a few human moments in my show. I don't mind if there are a few moments where I stammer and hem and haw because my brain just thinks too fast from my mouth sometimes. That happens when I speak on stage. That happens when I speak to people at the bar. That's just how I am. So, like, what would you do if your guest had a stutter? Would you edit out the stutter?
No.
You know? So to me, there does come a point of editing too much. And like my wife has a show. She teaches improv and sketch comedy, and edits her show. It's one of those like, wait a minute, don't you teach improv and you're editing a show? That just seems funny to me. But at the same time, her show is incredibly crafted in that way. The conversation is crafted in that way, and the audience loves it. So don't deny the process that she has going on, you know?
It all really comes down to, it all really comes down to sound design. Like, people don't think of it in a way of sound design. You want to have a particular sound for your show.
Yeah.
If it doesn't match from episode to episode, people are going to not understand. And I mean, we all hear the typical saying, like, people don't like change. So if it goes from being incredibly terrible audio into amazing audio, and then all of a sudden the very next episode is back to terrible audio, people are going to get confused. They're not going to necessarily want to listen to it because they don't know what they're going to get.
It's one thing if you tell people, like, hey, we're going to be live from a comic book convention. The audio might sound different because we're going to be using different equipment. People will understand that. They get it. Especially if they hear the rustling and the bustling going on around it.
Well, and you know, it's interesting because when this show first started, not this show, but when Dudes and Beer first started, I was in a rehearsal space here in Austin. So you would actively hear sometimes the band next door rehearsing in the background, very softly, but you could hear it. And they were a band of some Austin renowned at one point. But it was pretty cool. And whenever it came to the point of the show being based out of my studio, things like that at home, people were like, "Oh man, I kind of miss the band in the background," because they'd had like 2.5 years of listening to a band in the background.
What band was
part
it?
of the show?
What band was it?
Oh God, what was it? I'm trying to remember. They were part of the 13th Floor Elevators originally, and split off. Yeah, it was pretty wild. There was a great group of musicians that rehearsed over at Austin Music Rooms where I was. It was pretty sweet. It was a great spot. But at the same time, listen to how quiet it is in my studio.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like one of the things I want to bring up for sure is that we always talk about just get started, just do it, just, go ahead and get your first episode and get going, because if you don't go ahead and start, then you're just going to keep pushing it back until you have perfection, and perfection's never going to come. So you're just not ever going to do it. I mean, I think that kind of goes into the audio realm as well. Your audio doesn't have to be perfect when you start.
No.
Just start. Just see if you even enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then that's perfectly fine. But definitely grow as you come through. Oh, sorry, my phone is.
It's all right.
As we're talking about audio quality changing,
As it can't beat that timing.
He did that on purpose, I think.
One of the things that I bring up regularly, especially talking about this, is post-production. And there are a few things to consider that a lot of people use regularly: compression, limiting, expansion, things like that. But those can get, especially beginners, in a lot of problems in a lot of ways. Compression and limiting, that kind of stuff and even normalization can lead to some big issues.
I use something levelator, like a levelator program, instead of normalizing, because it's normalizing can accentuate the problem that you don't want to accentuate.
Exactly. And that's what the next slide is about, is what I prefer to use. I mean, typically normalization is, once again, what you're doing once you've got everything leveled out back to each other. Hey, there he is.
Sorry. For some reason, my phone is on silent. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, I use it as my webcam because it's literally probably one of the best cameras that I have at my disposal. And for some reason, even though my phone's on silent, somebody called me and it still rings. So I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. The automatic gain control, like you said just a second ago, Carrie, Levelator is one of the plugins that people use for that. I honestly, for a lot of my basic just audio treatment, use a program called...
What you want to do is capture a few moments of silence before you start recording. That will allow you time to be able to grab the room sound and subtract it. Now listen to the difference. So basically what you want to do is capture a few moments of silence before you start recording. That will allow you time to be able to grab the room sound and subtract it.
That right there is called spectral subtraction, folks.
Yes, that is one of the first things you learn in film school too.
It is. Yep, exactly. It's called tone in film school.
What you
it really is that.
It's getting all those weird sounds in the room, the hum of the air conditioner, something in the background. So when you go to take it out, it pulls that portion of it out and not the good stuff.
Yeah, precisely. You're basically giving the program. I normally try to record a good 5 to 10 seconds. Film, you would normally record about 30 seconds to a minute. But most programs, like I use WavePad by NCH for quick, easy audio treatment. It has for free. And their free version has one of the best spectral subtractions out there.
Really?
It is phenomenal. And all you do is highlight a little point of that noise, say grab the sound, highlight the whole track and say subtract spectral subtraction. Boop, and it's done. And
I need to get this. We need to link this application now.
That is all actually. If you visit the Podcast Cadet website, there is a free software section on the Podcast Cadet website where that is linked.
Excuse me. Don't visit the Podcast Cadet website. Google it.
Google it. Google it. There
That's
you go.
right.
I like that even better. But like you were saying a minute ago, along with that spectral subtraction, after you do that, go through and do automatic gain control, folks. That's where it will take the softer sounds and bring them up to the level of the louder sounds. And it brings it all together at that point.
So
those two things.
If everybody has a bad day when they're recording, especially when there's multiple people and you're using a mixer.
Regularly.
So if you have 3 or 4 people at the same time, and then one of them at some point moves away from the mic and they're lower and they get closer back and forth, instead of you automatically doing that, like a program like the Levelator or something, like you run that, I run the uncompressed wave file through it, not an MP3 compression or anything. And then I always, the way I work is after I've edited everything together, I do one last wave file and run it through it again.
Yep.
It's just the best way to get everything to that same level, especially when you're playing around like some of my stuff, when you're doing music and then you have talking and then the back, Well, and the main thing is, once again, go through and do that spectral subtraction first, because if you go through and change the level, then try to get the spectral subtraction, you're amplifying the noise in some spots. So it's gonna sound kind of choppy and garbly. You'll get a little bit of like digital, like bleeps and blops going on. So you want to make sure to treat that audio in the proper order. Try to get rid of background sound in a track before you level it out. That kind of thing. And that just comes from years. You're literally learning from my years of failure. People. I think the most important thing that we've come away with from this is audio is very important. You can have a bad video with great audio and people will watch it, but you have a great video with bad audio, people will stop it right away. Yeah. And I think one of the last things I'd like to talk about real quick is signal path. And that's whether it's on your social media accounts. This is kind of, if you don't have a flow chart for how things go across the internet for your podcast, folks, do it. It's one of the best things in the world that you can have, to physically be able to see in front of your face the way that things disseminate across the internet, where they originate, how they move is one of the most important things. It really does help you shift your audience. It helps you shift. It allows you to be able to pivot on a dime. Even in things like what I'm doing right now, rebranding, knowing this path and the way that things move around in my show and across the internet is important, as well as knowing the way that they are in your studio. Start to know your digital footprint, start to know a roadmap, the same way that you would draw a map to somebody to get to your party on a Saturday night. Give yourself a connection map. Give yourself a point-to-point connection map of your show. I think that so many people do not have this at the ready. I traveled the country setting up rooms from nothing to being conferences and then tearing them down again. Signal path just lives in my head. But if it doesn't live in your head, my God, man, having that piece of paper, and most of the time, whenever I make one for somebody, I advise them to go print it and laminate it. Keep it somewhere in your studio. Keep it handy. That way, if you have issues or anything like that, you can trace the problems. With that little piece of paper, you can be like, okay, my sound starts at the microphone. From there, it goes into here. From there, it goes into there. And you can start tracing the problem of connection, whether it starts with your microphone or the microphone cable or the interface cable or the USB port on the computer.
you have to be able to trace those steps down to be able to find the issue that's going on in your sound system, to be able to find the noise that's going on in your sound system, which microphone is making the noise, that kind of stuff. So I think that's a great place to kind of finish that thought as far as audio quality. If you aren't driving that signal path of your system home into your head, start doing that now. Really start remembering the way that things are hooked up in your system. Well, that way you can trace down problems.
That's great advice. It's been very educational. Do we have time to take any questions from the audience watching?
Absolutely. I got all the time in the world, guys.
What do you say, Jared? Yeah, take one.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you're on the stream with us and you have any questions, definitely put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Chris, real quick, you were talking about the normalization and stuff of your shows. One thing you didn't cover that was on there was LUFS. And for people who might not know, what are LUFS and what do you typically set yours to?
You know, believe it or not, I don't really play a whole lot with my LUFS, but typically I am pushing things out at close to -6, something like that. I tend to cook things a little bit. I go music mastering on it. I bring things up to just below 0, pretty close to 6, something like that, knowing the fact that things will be crushed down to the automatic LUF point by just about any server. So most of the time, whenever a server picks up your file, it's going to compress it and crunch it down into the file size and LUFS that it needs anyway. So most of the time I put my things, right up around like, I want to say it's -6. Let me take a look between -9, -6, right up around there. I want to say the industry standard is -12 to 16. Something along those lines. But I tend to go a little bit louder.
Okay.
I
usually put mine like right in between that -12, -16 range, just to keep it within the what most people would consider standard.
Yeah, that is definitely the industry standard on most platforms that you're going to. If you go through and look for their standards of what they want imported, that is definitely the LUFS range that they want. Once again, I just kind of have the attitude of that's where I put everything. So
yeah,
I guess the only time I didn't do that was when I was actively editing NPR. And at that point I had a template set up. And if you have a DAW, folks, go through and make yourself a template, make it easy for yourself.
Yeah.
Set up those compressions and things like that you use every week. Just set them up in there,
and for those who don't know, explain what a DAW is for those who don't know.
DAW is your digital audio workstation. So whatever program you're working in, I am an Adobe Suite guy. I used
Audition
Adobe
is great. I love Audition.
I used it was a radio standard. So
what do you edit your audio shows in? Do you
I edit
Audition?
all. Yeah. Okay. I'm an Audition user for everything.
I'm an Adobe guy, but I honestly edit all my audio shows in Premiere, and then in Render. If I need to do anything, I'll do something in Audition real quick, back and forth. But I do all my piecing together in Premiere.
Yeah,
it's because I'm used to it, being the video guy.
Hey, and that's just it. If that's the platform that you're used to, all those plugins are cross compatible.
Yep.
Any plugin that you use in Adobe Audition, you'll be able to use in Adobe Premiere.
That's true. Beck's over there in GarageBand land.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And don't be ashamed of that. Don't be ashamed to be in GarageBand land.
It works.
Hey, I was recommending free software just a minute ago, guys. I use free software every single week. Doesn't mean it's not any good just because it's free. They're free suites. They're purchase suites even better, and it's crazy cheap. I honestly recommend for a lot of people that are wanting to go professional DAW, professional audio workstation, but don't necessarily have the budget for a monthly plan,
like a Pro Tools or something
Adobe
like that,
or Pro Tool. Pro Tools is really, honestly, it's a great system, folks, but you have to have a system built to run Pro Tools.
Yeah.
That's all that there is to it. If you're not using a Mac, it may be a little clunky here and there. And if you're not using a crazy high-end computer with a lot of computing power, it can definitely get a little wonky. But I'm a big recommender on Reaper.
Oh,
yeah,
that's what I learned in class.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say that is what most colleges now have students learning on. It is cross-compatible between Adobe, and any Reaper project can be imported into Pro Tools and any professional studio, vice versa. You know, those stem tracks can be taken back and forth. So, yeah, like Reaper is, I want to say, a $60 license.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Not expensive.
And you get full access to everything, and it's updated regularly. Like, it is a very, very quality program that works on most machines that other programs won't work on, as far as memory, RAM, things like that. If you've got a computer that's a little bit in the background, you know, processor wise, things like that, Reaper is definitely the way to go for you.
It's not a memory hog for sure.
It isn't. It's a really, really light system and very, very user friendly. So it's a great one to stretch your legs, especially if you're trying to get into the realm of multi-track production. I myself typically deal with things in the stereo realm. I don't do a lot of multi-track production on my shows, but I do multi-track production for other people's shows, you know, where they send me the tracks to produce and edit, or even just to clean up, and then they edit them, you know, stuff like that. If you have friends that are good at it, folks, reach out to them. You know, if you got friends that are going
That's what
through,
friends are for, right?
Yeah, like if I guarantee you, probably every single podcaster in Houston knows at least one person that is going to Houston Community College or some other place for audio engineering or video, something like that. They are learning these concepts. Don't be afraid to go to them for help. Don't be afraid to be like, hey man, you want to practice on a few of my tracks, you know, and sit in on that session, see what they're doing, pick their brain, stuff like that. Most of us audio guys, as you can tell, folks, are not ashamed to talk about audio. We'll talk about it for hours on end and get really
talking
deep
about audio.
So,
I mean, that's really how I learned. You know, I came into podcasting not knowing anything about any programs. Whenever it came to the audio side, I was a film guy, so I knew editing somewhat and piecing stuff together in a film standpoint, but not really audio. So it was an easy transition coming from video to audio. Yeah. But there's definitely a lot more that you need to look at in audio than you do for film. So and you know, just to kind of piggyback on that thought, Jared, all the people wanting to do video, my suggestion is be as comfortable as you can with a show the way it is. Shows like what you're looking at right now, 3-camera shows, stuff like that, can be very, very hard to edit without 3 cameras of raw footage. They can be very hard to edit and not look jumpy. You know, if you watch a lot of instructional videos, things like that, you can see sometimes where the guy took like 8 takes in like 20 seconds of video, and you can see it like jump and move around. And, like it's hard. It's hard. I cover a lot of that in my show with on-screen graphics, that kind of stuff. I can always take a computer screen. If like, you know, if somebody's
B-roll.
dog hops up in the background or something like that, like, yeah, let's show your website on screen real quick.
We got that B-roll.
But it can be hard. It can be really hard to edit and incorporate video and get that stuff synced right and everything else. So if you're just starting out and wanting to do a show, maybe try it just audio, see if it works for you. It's definitely going to be incrementally easier to edit and faster to produce. I think that a lot of what's leading to modern day pod drag with folks is what you're looking at right here. The fact that everybody wants to incorporate video. And that can be very hard to do and do properly. You guys are doing it in the most proper and stripped down way possible. And I laud you for that. Because the simpler you can do it, the better. Keep it simple, stupid. That's the best way.
And obviously we have some issues.
Well, hey man, issues exist. Like I did shows that millions of people watched every day. We had issues.
We have issues. At least we don't have subscriptions.
Hey, that famous moment of we'll do it live. Like that happened for a reason. Because that kind of stuff happens every day in a studio. Every day.
It's so funny how often that video clip comes up whenever you're talking about audio.
Well,
and for those who don't know, that's an old Bill O'Reilly video clip. Yeah. Just go YouTube, we'll do it live, and I'm sure you'll see Bill O'Reilly first thing that pops up.
Absolutely. And it really is about like, be willing to forgive yourself. Be willing to accept the fact that technical issues happen.
Yeah, most definitely.
It happens. Just roll with the punches, move forward, and keep on doing stuff. Don't let it knock you down, man. So,
okay. One final thought, Chris. What do you think the future of podcasting is? We ask everybody, and we want to get your opinion.
Quite honestly, I think the future of podcasting is going more and more toward directly in your pocket. It really is. It's getting easier and easier to produce apps, to make apps that serve up your own audio, that serve up your own video, things like that. So
almost like having your own website.
Yeah. And I mean, having your own website is step one to that.
Yeah.
Quite literally. And one of the examples I give people all the time live at conferences is one of my former employers, one of the many people that I've worked with over the years, like them or not. I was a producer. My job was to mash buttons and find guests. That was my job. But at one point I actively ran production for Alex Jones. Very in the trenches job. You want to talk about some Bill O'Reilly moments? That was almost a daily occurrence. To say the least.
I can imagine.
But at the same time, the reason I bring him up to people is if you want an example of somebody who has learned to properly curate his content and to move an audience. He is not even on a single mainstream platform. The man had to make his own website called bandvideo.com. Because YouTube won't let him on. But yet still he has millions of views every day and sells hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of merch every year. And the only place you can get his content is his website. So don't be afraid of the fact of just having it on one place. Don't be afraid. Remember to control where it's coming from. Yeah. And the more you can control that, be it from your own URL, from your own app, from your own URL, things like that, to be able to serve that content directly to your listener, I think is really the biggest next move. Not that Spotify, Anchor, all those things aren't great, but like people
owning
like Todd Cochran, own your content, own your URL, own your brand. Like I said, like him or not, millions of listeners every single day. Yeah. Because he has his own website and he can curate his own content. It makes a huge, huge difference. It really does. And once again, get out there, get it going, but try to have a plan. One of the biggest things I ever did probably for myself in life was to take a U of H weekend class from their business school on running a small business. And
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can do for sure. All right.
It's just the fact of branding. Own your brand, own your show.
Branding.
Own your concept.
Definitely own your brand for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Chris, where can everybody find you?
You can find me everywhere that the internet is. You can find me at chrisjordan.ninja. That is my personal website if you're looking for AV work, anything like that. You can find me always at the HC Universal Network. That is where all of my shows are. You can find me at dudesandbeer.com. Listen to talkingsound.com if you're into audio equipment, interviews about audio, podcast cadet training series for questions like this, that kind of stuff. We will soon actually be launching the podcast confessional, which is where people can go and leave their story about their bad, horrible podcasting experience. And we will come on as a panel and confront your experience and give you kind of a different way to approach that experience and how you may be able to avoid it. So keep your eyes out for that, folks.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Chris, definitely thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and pop up our social and our email address. If you want to get in touch with us, definitely go to HIPS HTX on social media. We just recently got a TikTok. So, yeah, go follow us on there. Carrie knows nothing about TikTok. I'm sure.
I've seen it. I'm not ready to produce for it, but that's about it.
Well, go follow us on all social media. All social media is HIPS HTX. You can email us hipshtx@gmail.com. Let us know who you want us to have on the show. If there's somebody in particular, a podcaster that you want us to reach out to and try to get on the show, email us or contact us on social. Let us know who that is. And I guess that's going to do it for this episode. And we'll see you in about a month.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, not a problem. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Anytime.
All right, have a good night, everybody.